faithfully delivering value and interpreting great books from around the world. Hi there, this is Sally with the Book Talk. Today, I'm going to interpret for you this novel, Quo Vadis, written by the famous Polish author Henryk Sienkiewicz. Sienkiewicz was born in 1846 and passed away in 1916. He created a ton of classic historical novels in his lifetime, including Quo Vadis, With Fire and Sword, The Teutonic Knights, and more. The Quo Vadis we're talking about today is the peak of Sienkiewicz's creative career. Oh, this novel was published in 1896 when Poland was under Russian rule. The scenes of resisting Romans in the book really fired up the Polish fight against Russia. And get this, in the 1905 Nobel Prize race, Sienkiewicz beat out the Russian literary giant Tolstoy with his epic work, won the award, and joined the world's greatest writers. Almost at the same time, the Polish people also kicked off a huge anti-Russian uprising. To get Quo Vadis, first we got to cover the historical backdrop set in the novel, which is the Roman Empire between AD 62 and 68. The emperor then was the infamous tyrant Nero, who leaned on his mom's backing. He took the throne at 17, started out diligent, but later clashes with the Senate got worse, and his depraved, violent side showed. He went on to kill his own mother, wife, and some loyal ministers. He lived lavishly, totally ignoring the people's suffering. He even called himself a poet. To write great poems, he ordered Rome burned just to watch it burn and make poems for fun. In the end, the people rebelled against the tyranny and Nero killed himself. Next, we also need to cover the religious angle, which is how the Romans persecuted Christians. The Romans believed in polytheism, thinking gods on Mount Olympus protected Rome, making it eternal and great. But when Christianity rose up, it drew in Rome's commoners, foreigners, slaves, and other oppressed folks, so it became a big threat to Roman polytheism. To hold on to power, the Romans brutally persecuted Christian believers. The book spotlights early Christian acts and shows how their teachings inspired change. So many critics call it a Christian epic. Sienkiewicz, he even called this novel a true Christian epic. In Quo Vadis, besides Nero, most characters like Nero's wife Poppaea, Praetorian commanders Tigellinus and Linus, actually existed historically. But the protagonists are fictional elements, matter-of-factly. Vinicius, a young Roman patrician, and Lygia, daughter of a barbarian king who's a devout Christian. Now let's enter this grand tragic tale. The core story revolves around Vinicius and Lygia's romance. When first introduced, Vinicius is a rude, hot-tempered, selfish young aristocrat. He just returned from war, recuperating at a general's estate where he met Lygia. Lygia was the daughter of a barbarian chief defeated by Rome, kept there as a hostage. Her noble grace charmed the general's family, so they adopted her. The general's wife especially cherished Lygia as her own. Being Christian herself, she led Lygia to convert. Oh, when Vinicius first saw Lygia at the estate, he was mesmerized, thinking her like Venus at dawn. Vinicius declared, "I want no gold, no Corinthian bronze, no amber, no pearls, no wine, no feasts, only her. I want to hold her." Yet now my arms embrace only air. Later, Vinicius arranged to meet Lygia and confessed his love. Lygia too felt drawn to the handsome, radiant Vinicius. But as a Roman aristocrat, Vinicius acted like a slave owner, wanting immediate possession. Knowing the general wouldn't surrender his adopted daughter, he sought his uncle's help. Vinicius, his uncle, was a prestigious Roman statesman and Nero's close friend. He petitioned the emperor. Nero agreed. He dispatched the Praetorian Guard with imperial orders to bring hostage Lygia to the palace. Under pretext of supervision, she'd be given to Vinicius. Heartbroken yet obedient, the general's family surrendered Lygia. Ursus begged to accompany her as bodyguard. In Nero's palace, Lygia trembled with fear because she'd heard all about Emperor Nero's cruelty, and Roman feasts. The shameless feasts had bloody gladiator shows, juggling acts, and outright orgies. So, when she entered the lavish feast and felt lost among strangers, the handsome and warm Vinicius suddenly appeared, bringing her huge comfort. At the feast, Vinicius confessed his love to Lygia and acted fairly decent. But later, he couldn't hold back his lust anymore, especially when the feast peaked with obscene dances everywhere. Vinicius had more wine and slowly showed his brutal, lewd side. He forcibly grabbed Lygia and tried to kiss her against her will. Lygia was terrified but couldn't break free. At the critical moment, bodyguard Ursus appeared, brushed aside the drunken Vinicius like leaves, and carried Lygia out of the feast. Lygia finally escaped the debauched feast. She wanted to rush back to the general's mansion with Ursus overnight, but without the emperor's order, no one could leave the palace. It meant death. So Lygia went to the empress for help. But the empress was super jealous. Every beautiful woman in the palace made her suspicious. When she saw Lygia's stunning beauty, she thought, if Nero noticed such a goddess, what might happen? The more she dwelled on it, the more uneasy she felt. So, despite Lygia kneeling and begging, the empress sneakily had someone tip off Vinicius. That very night, Vinicius sent people to take Lygia away. Of course, Vinicius didn't want to harm Lygia. He'd set up a fancy dinner to chat and break down her defenses. Lygia got into the prepared sedan with some slaves sent to Vinicius's place. But unexpectedly, Ursus and a group of Christians ambushed them halfway, rescuing Lygia. Turns out the Christians had heard that Lygia, a fellow believer, was in danger, so they teamed up with Ursus to save her. Losing Lygia again left Vinicius totally disappointed. Vinicius wanted to find Lygia again, so he started dealing with the Christian group, constantly digging for info. He gradually learned that Christians were totally different from Romans. Romans and earlier Greeks both believed in multiple gods. Zeus was the chief god for Greeks. For Romans, Jupiter was their chief god. Under Jupiter were various gods like Apollo for arts, Mercury as messenger, Venus for love and beauty, each with their roles. In myths, gods loved feasting and revelry, just like Roman palace banquets. But Christians worshipped one all-knowing, all-powerful God, supremely good and just, loving the whole universe. Christians followed God's command: love others, show tolerance, repay evil with kindness. Vinicius went to hear Apostle Peter preach. He discovered Christians everywhere, in Rome, beyond, even in the army. He slowly understood. Even if he found Lygia, he couldn't possess her. She belonged to God. Tempting her with passion or wealth would fail. In Rome, he could take any woman as mistress. But Lygia was Christian. She'd rather die than yield to him. Yet he still craved her. With a Greek guide and bodyguard, he sneaked to Christian quarters but got knocked out by Ursus. Making he found Christians healing his broken arm and head wounds instead of killing him. Lygia stayed by his bedside all night, tenderly caring for him despite his past violence. Remembering his past brutality, Vinicius asked, Lygia, why didn't you let them kill me? Lygia gently replied, peace be with you, may God restore your health soon. Here, Lygia commanded deep respect, nothing like Nero's court. Vinicius learned Lygia was a king's daughter too. Though Romans saw all outsiders as inferior, while Romans themselves lived corruptly. Vinicius began soul-searching, entering Lygia's Christian world and changing himself. The mindset and behavior shaped in Roman aristocratic society. For the first time in his life, he felt the world shouldn't be like Rome, a paradise of wine and lust. Rome needed change, and this shift in Vinicius's thinking brought him closer to Lygia. As for Lygia, she gradually regained affection for Vinicius too. Apostles Peter and Paul lived in this Christian community, watching the protagonist's relationship unfold while instilling God's principles in Vinicius. Peter told Vinicius, since you've abandoned hedonism, God's grace remains. Your sorrow will fade, joy will come. He then told Lygia, By avoiding Vinicius yet praying for him, you show virtue. God's grace remains with you too. Your sorrow will fade, joy will come. Under this blessing, Vinicius gradually shed his arrogant noble demeanor and humbled himself, kneeling before Lygia to confess his profound love. Now he truly understood love, not conquest or possession, but respect, humility, and devotion. Lygia too showed humility and devotion before Vinicius. Peter, seeing this, declared, "Love one another. Now your love is free from sin." Meanwhile, Emperor Nero still wallowed in extravagance. The novel depicts him as bloated, obese, with a large head swollen with vanity. His every appearance contrasted starkly with the Christian's ways. Nero reveled in luxury, constant feasts and constructions celebrating Rome's dominion. Sienkiewicz vividly described his opulent banquets with golden arches and marble columns. Crowds in gowns trailing the floor, slaves everywhere. Clamor of pages and praetorians mixed with fountains. Countless oil lamps glittered, fragrances swirling. Exquisite artifacts from the East were displayed everywhere, with flowers and rare birds in golden and silver cages. But behind the lavish banquet lay various anxieties in people's hearts. The novel writes that these fairy-like adorned people were consumed by anxiety, greed, and envy. Those rushing to the feast in flowers and jewelry might be executed criminals tomorrow. Nero believed Rome was eternal and immortal, backed by the firm support of the gods, and his greatest glory as emperor was praising the gods to display their splendor. He was passionate about writing poetry, composing verses for every grand festival, and reciting them publicly to create his perfect poem. He actually wished to witness a citywide fire firsthand. Thus, this depraved emperor made a terrifying decision. To set Rome on fire, the novel's description of this fire spans 6 lengthy chapters. When the fire started, thick smoke billowed, some shooting straight into the sky like twisting serpents. The Colosseum became ruins. Streets and alleys burned and collapsed one after another. Whenever a house collapsed, pillars of fire shot into the sky. The columns of the Temple of Hercules and the Temple of Cupid were ablaze. And the Temple of Diana, Pompey's palace, and the Temple of Vesta were burned to rubble. The entire city center of Rome turned into a roaring, flaming volcano like a hell on earth. Amid the fire, people were frantic, rushing about in panic, nearly suffocating. Hundreds of thousands of men, women, and children had to set up endless camps outside the city with no food or clothing. Homeless, shrouded in smoke and dust, filled with clamor, hatred, and terror. Rumors spread too. Some said free food and clothing would soon be distributed. Others claimed water was poisoned. Nero wanted to exterminate the residents to destroy Rome and move the capital to Greece or Egypt. The Christian belief that this fire signaled the apocalypse also spread among Roman polytheists. Vinicius witnessed firsthand the immense suffering people endured in this man-made fire, hating Nero to the core. With Christian's desperate help, he risked his life to rescue Lygia from the fire. After that, he accepted Christian baptism while people descended into madness. In the firelit clouds, people seemed to see gods gazing down at Earth's destruction. Some reached out begging for mercy, others cursed the gods. Innocent subjects suffered, while Emperor Nero reveled in delight. He'd waited until flames reached the palace before returning to Rome, just to watch the spectacular destruction at its peak. Dressed in purple robes with a gold crown, bathed in crimson light, he stared at the reddened sky with a tragic actor's expression. He wasn't thinking of Rome's history and soul being destroyed, nor the hundreds of thousands of displaced people. He was just racking his brain for sorrowful, moving verses. He wanted to perfectly depict this catastrophe's grandeur to earn the highest praise and wildest applause. But people were already on the brink of collapse. After the fire came famine and plague, with July's scorching heat fueling the tragedy. Air from flames and sun made breathing nearly impossible. People descended into chaos and rage. Seeing Nero still admiring the fire and composing poetry deepened suspicions that he'd started it. They armed themselves with sticks, pitchforks, swords, all kinds of weapons, shouting until wars became roars of fury. Gathering together, they condemned the fire's origin, pointing fingers straight at Nero. The Praetorian Guard couldn't stop the rebellion anymore. Now Nero got scared. The empress quickly suggested scapegoating Christians for the fire. The palace spread rumors that Christians had burned Rome. Overnight, Romans turned into fanatics, persecuting Christians. The Praetorian Guard launched citywide raids. Countless Christians, including Lygia, were thrown into prison. Now, the novel entered its bloodiest phase. Romans incited to shout in streets for feeding Christians to lions. Emperor Nero began executing his plan to massacre Christians. He ordered rapid construction of an arena, importing lions, tigers, elephants, crocodiles, wolves, bears, bison from across the empire. He told the people, "Will hold Rome's grandest celebration since its founding. Never before have so many been sacrificed to Roman gods." Then came wildly inventive, bloody spectacles. Sometimes over 100 Christians were released at once, letting hungry beasts pounce and tear them apart. Sometimes they blindfolded Christians and made them fight each other. Other times, they made Christians fight strong gladiators who easily killed them. Later, right in the arena center, some Christians were nailed to crosses. After each massacre, Nero would dedicate a poem, and the Roman crowd cheered at the sight of bloodshed. This slaughter spared no one, men, women, children. It was utterly appalling. But in the face of death, Christians didn't cry out. They just prayed to God in the arena center, offering passive sacrifice without resistance. Sometimes, some viewers grew tired of this brutal show, and they began to doubt whether these calm, gentle people could really be arsonists. Then, the nearly insane Nero orchestrated a grand finale. They tied the naked Lygia to a wild bull's back and set it charging toward her giant bodyguard Ursus. While Vinicius watched from the stands, this was the most thrilling moment in the whole story. From the stands, Vinicius let out a heart-wrenching cry. In the arena, Ursus grabbed the bull's horns with both hands, using all his strength to hold back its charge. Finally, he succeeded in breaking the bull's neck. Lygia was saved. Romans always revered strength and violence. At this moment, they gave huge cheers to Ursus, and Vinicius finally lost control. Suddenly, he leaped over seats and railings, desperately running to Lygia, covering her naked body with his large robe. The stands erupted with pleas. They no longer believed these Christians set Rome on fire. People clenched fists, demanding release. Anger flared up. Finally, Emperor Nero, fearing the crowd's power, had to agree to their demand, announcing the release of Lygia and Ursus. We see humanity triumph over brutality, compassion over inhumanity, love over cruelty. In the novel, these transformations, including the fulfillment of love between Vinicius and Lygia, are all set against the backdrop of Christ's influence. However, in this cruel ordeal, why were Christians able to hold on to their faith? Why, when countless fellow believers suffer tragic deaths, can others still face doom with calm? Actually, at first, people were confused and desperate. When Christians were driven to the arena center, many complained. A widow begged the Lord, "Give me back my son." A man angrily said, "My daughter was violated, but the Lord didn't intervene." Someone asked despairingly, "If I die, who will care for my children?" Christians couldn't understand why their devout faith brought no protection, only such tragic fate. To this, Peter replied that he'd witnessed Christ's death firsthand and was heartbroken then, but 3 days later Christ rose from death. Peter then told the complainers, "You shouldn't be so weak in faith. The Lord gives not just life but courage and faith for rebirth." Christ showed the way with his blood, empowering the weakest to become strong and face trials with composure. Maybe we can't fully grasp this doctrine now, but for the suffering Romans then, Apostle Peter's words banished their fear and doubt. They stood up again. Someone shouted, "Glory to the Lord!" Peter placed hands on their heads, blessing each. Meanwhile, Nero targeted Peter and Paul for slaughter. Peter prepared to flee, but didn't know where. Then he saw a vision, Christ walking toward him. Peter knelt, choked up, asking, "Lord, where are you going?" He heard Christ reply, "I go to Rome to be crucified a second time." Hearing this, Peter suddenly knew what to do. Without a word, he turned back. His disciples also knelt, asking, "Where are you going?" Peter said, "To Rome." Back in Rome, Roman soldiers searching for him had just left, but Peter remained unshaken. He preached daily, and countless new believers were born each day. The novel writes that now every tear shed in the arena echoes in thousands of new believers, and Peter ultimately walked the path of martyrdom. He was crucified, his sacrifice, atoning for the city's atrocities. The spirit of Christianity took root in this city and spread to wider regions, and the Romans awakened, completely losing trust in Emperor Nero. The novel's ending depicts Nero's downfall. In Gaul under Roman rule, rebellion against Nero arose. Abandoned by all, he committed suicide while fleeing. The story ends. Quo Vadis places fictional characters into an epic. Although there are many characters, the story is arranged smoothly and accessibly. It has a love story of handsome men and beautiful women, bloody killings, hero rescuing beauty scenes, and grand epic depictions. For example, the banquets and fires in Rome with constant dramatic conflicts. The author Sienkiewicz is both a Nobel Prize-winning classic writer and a best-selling novelist. Quo Vadis has been translated into over 50 languages since its publication. Adaptations into films, TV series, plays, and even comic books have also had a significant impact. Beyond its thrilling plot, the main reason this book spread quickly at the time was its promotion of Christianity. Christianity was the dominant religion in Europe at the time, later spreading to the Americas, Asia, Africa, and Oceania. Quo Vadis uses a twisting and shocking story to show readers why Christianity could take root in people's hearts through its boundless, indiscriminate love and its firm opposition to tyranny, which earned the novel wide recognition in the Western world. In a letter to his uncle, Vinicius declared the inevitability of Christianity replacing Roman rule. Wherever Christian doctrine spread, Roman rule ended. Our way of life ended. Between conquerors and the conquered, differences between rich and poor, masters and slaves ended. It is in this sense that European readers often see Quo Vadis as a work praising Christianity, which is also a key reason for its popularity. However, Sienkiewicz's main writing motive was actually political. He hoped to use a Christian background and story to awaken Polish national consciousness, hoping that, in the face of oppression, Poles would rather die than submit. From the late 18th century to the latter half of the 19th century, when Sienkiewicz lived, Poland was repeatedly partitioned by powerful neighbors, Russia, Austria, Germany, and many Poles were forced to flee to these countries. One could say this is a nation weathered by profound suffering. As a patriot, Sienkiewicz deeply cared about the fate of Poles. He passionately urged Germans to treat Poles within their borders well, allowing them to preserve their language and culture. When Quo Vadis was published, Poland was under Russian rule. The novel's depictions of Christians bravely facing sacrifice deeply moved Polish readers. For Poles, Christian spirit aligned with their liberation struggle in justice, resilience, and sacrifice. Later, between 1905 and 1907, Poles launched a massive uprising. As Sienkiewicz hoped, during Poland's darkest hour, Quo Vadis actively awakened national consciousness. Even today, this novel holds universal significance. As Vinicius says at the end, Christ replaces conquerors and conquered, bringing compassion. Sienkiewicz's Christ embodies mercy. This humanitarian pursuit remains eternally radiant. Today, Sienkiewicz is hailed as a 19th century Polish hero. Quo Vadis asks not just where God is, but where our faith and souls reside. Where should we go? What choices must we make? All right, that concludes our interpretation of Quo Vadis. Reading notes are below the audio. See you tomorrow.